Demian Brady is the Vice President of Research for the National Taxpayers Union Foundation. And on the other economic front, while we're talking about tariffs, we also have to talk about how how this country's spending money, spending us into crazy debt, and your tax rates. There is a tax bomb about to go off at the end of the year if Congress doesn't get on board and get this big, beautiful bill passed. And Mr. Brady, thanks a lot for your time this morning. Hello.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So, we talked a little about the business side of this with the tariffs in the last couple of segments. Now let's talk about the taxpayer side of this. What are we staring down the barrel of if there's no action by Congress, Mr. Brady?
Yeah, so let's look back and remember back in 2017, during Trump's first administration, he passed, along with Congress, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and went into effect in 2018. A lot has happened since then, pandemics and shutdowns and lots of unemployment and inflation. So people might not remember just how good the economy was booming after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was enacted. We saw bigger take-home pay, bigger paychecks, lots of job growth. We had record low unemployment. And, especially for workers without college degrees, we're seeing some of the fastest job gains and some of the biggest wage gains as well. So what's at stake this year is if Congress does not act by the end of the year, those tax cuts are going to expire. That's going to be the biggest tax cut in U.S. history, and it's going to be very aggressive and hit us at a time just as we're coming through inflation. Prices of fuel and groceries are starting to come down. We want to keep things booming and keep the economy moving, so we got to get these tax cuts preserved.
What kind of tax hike are we talking about? I heard a number of Republicans tell me this week while we were on Capitol Hill. I never really could quite quantify it. Not that I asked, and maybe you don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot. But, I mean, when you're talking tax hikes, they say one of the biggest, if not the biggest, single tax hike of the American public could happen next year if the Congress doesn't pass this bill. Do you happen to know the numbers on that?
Well, a family of four with the average income of around $80,000 would owe about $1,700 more in taxes next year. So that's equivalent to about 2 months of groceries. And we did analysis using data from the Tax Foundation, our friends over there. And if you go to NTU.org/states, we show the impact across every single state and what's going to happen, the average taxpayer, the tax hike that they're going to see if we don't move forward and keep the 2017 jobs cuts and the tax cuts going forward.
He's the Vice President of Research for the National Taxpayers Union Foundation, Demian Brady. And so, Mr. Brady, when you analyze the tax code, I don't know what the National Taxpayers Union's position is on this, but there's always this healthy debate about could we eliminate the IRS? Could we go to a straight flat or fair tax? Does your foundation take a position on that?
Well, we just had a meeting yesterday with the acting IRS commissioner and talking about fairness and tax administration and making sure that the IRS is moving forward into the 21st century. The IRS has had a plan for the last 30, 40 years to modernize its central database, the individual master file, which dates back to the early 1960s. And so we spent decades and decades and billions of dollars, and we haven't gotten to the end point yet. So it was very hopeful talking with the acting commissioner Faulkender yesterday, and they do have a plan. They brought in, with Elon Musk and his Doge team, brought in a lot of tech experts from the private sector going to help guide the IRS and move it forward. So we want, a flatter system would be better. We've got the system in place now that could be vastly improved and provide better services for taxpayers without costing so much money.
Mathematically speaking, just because I think, again, I don't do what you do, so I don't pretend to have the answers here, but I've always been curious in theory, based on your research and your data, if you taxed everyone at the same rate. Now, again, there are billionaires and there are people making minimum wage and all matter in between. If you taxed everyone at the same rate, is that a cleaner system? Ted Cruz once called it, fill out a postcard. Here's what I made this year, and here's the percentage I owe to you. Does that work in your view? Well,
it would be much simpler. There might be some concerns about fairness for people on the lower income. One thing we tracked through data from the IRS going back to the Reagan tax cuts. If you go to ntu.org/who pays taxes, We've seen that with every major tax cut put in place, going back to Reagan's tax cuts, Bush's tax cuts, and Trump's tax cuts. The tax code is getting more and more progressive. We're shifting a much greater burden of the income tax burden onto the wealthier incomes. And a lot of people, lower income earners, have been relieved from a lot of that. And part of that, especially from Trump's tax cuts, was the doubling of the standard deduction, which relieved a lot of low-income people from income taxes, and it also provided everybody else a substantial time saving because you don't have to spend all that time itemizing like previously, keeping track of all that paperwork. So it provided a great tax cut, and it saved a lot of hours in complexity and compliance with our tax system.
I know your wheelhouse is taxes, Mr. Brady, so again, I don't mean to get out of the lane here if you want to punt on this question, but we just talked to the small business owner talking about how tariffs have really walloped them, and it's, in the short term, if they don't figure it out, it could really sink their business. Do you think you could structure the tax code in the interim? Could the Trump administration structure the tax code in such a way to reward or alleviate the hopefully short-term pains businesses are going through to absorb these tariffs right now? Do you think that's an answer?
Well, one proposal that I've heard, I think, from the administration is to provide for retroactive tax policies for certain areas. I mean, that's something you could target towards businesses. And another big thing that we should do is bring back 100% full expensing, because that's what really helped kickstart the economy back in 2018 after the original tax cuts were enacted, and those phased out.
Could you explain that? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you explain full expensing,
sure.
What that means?
Yeah, so when businesses make investments, and then they can write off a portion of that on their taxes, and without 100% full expensing, it's a very complicated process. There's all these different sorts of forms and templates that you have to go through. It's much simpler if you provide for full expensing. That way, these businesses can get an immediate tax write-off, and it spurs a lot of investment. It's going to help create a lot of jobs. So that's something that ought to be a part of this package. And that plus retroactivity. And another thing is the sooner that Congress acts on this and puts it on Trump's desk, the more certainty we'll have going forward. It'd be a lot easier to plan, then easier to go and address some of the tariff issues and the global trade issues dealing with China and other issues around the globe.
Boy, it would be great then. Hopefully members of Congress, maybe they're doing that. I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot to be. They're trying this big, beautiful bill. I know they're trying to pack a ton into it. Maybe they're trying that as well. They say Memorial Day out of the House, perhaps. That seems to be Mike Johnson's target, at least for the House. Thune and Bessent have seemed to suggest it's probably more like 4th of July before this gets to the president's desk. Are you comfortable with that timeline?
The sooner the better. I know there's lots of complicated discussions going on behind the scenes. The House should start marking up in the Ways and Means Committee very soon. So then we would see what they have in terms of tax cuts. Other committees are proceeding. So, we're just want to encourage lawmakers to move forward with broad-based taxes, and let's prevent these tax cuts from 2017 expiring later this year.
Mr. Brady at the National Taxpayers Union Foundation, grateful for your time and perspective today. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you very much. It's great talking with you.